Hello everyone, welcome to Let's Talk Live from Talking Smart with Kamal. My name is Kamal and we will talk about Chapter 2 from Class 12 CBSE English Course Book Flamingo. Lost Spring, Stories of Stolen Childhood by Anees Jung. Before we talk about the stories, let's talk about a little bit about the author Anees Jung. She was born in Rourkela and spent her childhood and adolescence in Hyderabad, where she received her education and also in the US. Her parents were both writers and she began her career as a writer in India. She has been an editor and columnist for major newspapers in India and abroad and has authored several books. The following is an excerpt from her book titled Lost Spring, Stories of Stolen Childhood. In these stories, she analyzes the grinding poverty and traditions which condemn the children to a life of exploitation. It is a thought-provoking account of a number of children's lives who, for reasons of poverty, caste and religion, community, etc., clean floors in restaurants, roll bidis, weave saris and carpets, haul loads in factories and stone quarries. Rather than living a proper childhood, go to school, let alone learn a profession. The theme of the story is the loss of childhood and innocence due to poverty and exploitation. The title of the chapter, Lost Spring, is a metaphor used for loss of childhood of millions of child laborers in India. The first story in this chapter is titled Sometimes I Find a Rupee in the Garbage. Before we talk about it, let's remember that both the stories are in a narrative style, narrated from the point of view of the author, who is the narrator as well. So in this story, she talks about a group of ragpickers. Ragpickers are people who collect garbage, who collect plastics from the garbage. So here she encounters a young boy who really interests her, and she asks him, she says, "Why do you do this?" So he says that I have nothing else to do. And she says, go to school then. Now see, this kind of a thing, like when we tell people glibly, in a very non-serious way, we say, ye kar lo fir, aisa kyun nahi kar lete, without realizing that does this thing really matter to them, the kind of suggestion you're giving. When she says that kuch aur nahi hai karne ke liye, so why don't you go to school? And immediately she realizes that it was not the right thing to say, because the boy says, there is no school in my neighborhood, and when they build one, I will go. So she, in a very half-joking manner, she says, if I start a school, will you come? And he is so enthusiastic about it, and he says, yes, why not? But then now here something happens. The boy has taken this word of the author, of the narrator, to heart. So every time he meets her, he goes running to her and he says, is your school ready now? Can I come to your school? And the author gets embarrassed every time, because see, it's common sense. Schools cannot be started on a whim. They cannot be begun just with a thought, just like that. So she tells him that it takes longer to build a school. Can't happen overnight. Rato raat nahi hone wala hai. So when she says this, he gets quite discouraged, and then she says that maybe he's kind of gotten used to these kind of promises. She's embarrassed herself, for the kind of promises she has made, but then she says maybe it's like these kind of promises, they abound in his life, in his world. लोग वादे करते हैं, promises कर जाते हैं, पूरा कोई नहीं करता इन लोगों के लिए. So she feels that she has done an injustice to him by, igniting a desire for a dream that may not even be fulfilled. So after knowing him for quite a few months, she asks him about his name, and he says his name is Sahib-e-alam. Now, ironically, he doesn't even know the meaning of his name. And if he knew, she says, that what the meaning of his name is, he will never ever believe what it means, because it means the Lord of the universe. That's what Sahib-e-alam means. But the fact is that it's so hard to believe that he has this name, because he is not even the Lord or the master of his own destiny, let alone the universe. And his parents so optimistically had named him Sahib-e-alam. And so he says, but then unaware of whatever his name represents, he's walking around the streets with his friends, who are a group of barefoot boys. And like morning birds, they come early in the morning to pick garbage up, and by noontime they all disappear, they all go away. And she says, now over the time I have come to recognize these boys also, because they are regulars, they come nearly every day. So, and they're all barefoot, they don't wear shoes or slippers or anything, no footwear. So one day she asks one of the boys, why aren't you wearing chappals? Chappals are footwear, slippers. And the boy, very simply, very ordinarily, he says, my mother did not bring them down from the shelf. And then another boy in the group, he says, even if she did bring them down, give them to him, he will never wear them, he'll throw them off. So and that boy, the one who answers, is also he's wearing shoes that are mismatched. So when the author comments on this, and she says, why will you throw away your shoes? So he doesn't say anything, he just shuffles his feet. Shuffles means he just kind of very uncomfortably stands on, keeps hopping from one foot to the other. And this is, she says, it's kind of a very embarrassing moment, because it's been noticed that the poor have more of self-respect and ego than the rich, probably. And so she says, and they don't want to accept the fact that they can't even afford shoes. They may be in troubles, they may be in financial constraints, they may not have enough to eat or a good place to live in or whatever, but they don't want to, they would never accept the fact that they are poor. It is kind of a swear word to them. And she feels bad for this. And while she is talking to this boy, another one, he says, I want shoes. And he's a boy who's never owned a pair of shoes in his life. And then here, that's where the author, she talks about, she says, I've traveled all over the country and I've seen children walking barefoot in cities, on village roads and everywhere. And she says, when asked that why don't they wear shoes, normally the reason they give is that it's not that we don't have money to buy shoes, it's a tradition to stay barefoot. And she says probably this is an excuse to explain the perpetual state of poverty. Then she recalls a story about when she's talking about the shoes and all, and she recalls a story a man from Udupi once had told her. And he says when he was a little boy, he used to go to school that was past an old temple in the village, and his father was the priest over there. So he would briefly make a stop at the temple and pray to the goddess for a pair of shoes. And he says, the author says that 30 years after this whole thing, she visited this place, and the temple is now in ruins. Nobody goes there anymore because a new temple has been built across the road. And there's a young priest now with his family living, and this priest's family lives at the back of the old temple. So when she goes over there, she finds that there are red and white plastic chairs. A young boy dressed in a grey school uniform, wearing socks and shoes, arrives running with a school bag, throws it on the bed, on the folding bed cot over there, and runs inside. And she says when she sees this boy, she is reminded of the prayer this another boy used to make to the goddess for a pair of shoes. And when he finally got a pair of shoes, that boy went back to the goddess in the temple, and as a thank you he said, "Let me never lose them." And the goddess, he says, granted this prayer. And now what's happened is young boys like the son of the priest are wearing shoes. They go to school, they are studying. But there are many children like the ragpickers in the neighborhood who remain shoeless. Says these are the children nobody has prayed for, nobody has bothered for. And then she says, like she goes on and she talks about the fact that her acquaintance, her friendship with these rag pickers leads her to a very, very unique place. That's Seema Puri. Seema Puri is a slum that is on the outskirts of Delhi. And it says now Delhi is a metropolitan city. It's a cosmopolitan city, the capital of one of the biggest democracies in the world. And yet Seema Puri is miles away from this place, metaphorically speaking. It may be adjoining it, it may be right next to it, but it's far, far away, unreachable to the people living in Seema Puri. Because here now it says, because these people, they live in perpetual poverty. They are the people who came from Bangladesh in 1971 during the strife between India and Pakistan for Bangladesh. And they are squatters. Squatters are illegal tenants or whatever. And these people, they are amongst them. And Seema Puri in those days was a wilderness. It used to be all jungly. कोई रहता नहीं था यहाँ पे. It still is a wilderness. अभी भी जंगली ही है, जंगल ही है. But it is not empty now. There are people living in this place. There are structures of mud with little roofs of tin and tarpaulin, and there's no sewerage, no drainage of running water, and there are about 10,000 rag pickers, probably more than 10,000 rag pickers living over here, and they have lived here for more than 30 years. No identity, no permits, but they all have ration cards, and they have their names on the voters list, and that enables them to buy grain, because see, food is available on subsidized prices for people with names on voters list. And this is again, like if you think about it, they're squatters, they're not even legal residents, they're not even they don't have a passport or anything, they're here illegally. But who cares when livelihood, when existence is at stake? And they are exploited by politicians, they're exploited by the bigger well-off, affluent people, just for a little food grain, just for a little food, little sustenance. And if the votes get those people elevated to higher positions, at least in return these people, they are getting food. So they don't have an identity, but still it's like, okay, that's what our life is all about. So when they when they're asked about it, they say, like there's a line which the poet uses over here. She says food is more important than survival. Food is more important for survival than an identity. And they say, if at the end of the day we can feed our families and go to bed without an aching stomach, we would rather live here than in the fields that gave us no grain. Because in Bangladesh, where they used to live, they used to have beautiful fields and everything, but every year floods would come and they would suffer a loss, and it was kind of perpetual poverty and hunger. So here they say, even if there is poverty, at least we are not hungry. Our children, they go to sleep with food in their stomachs. They at least they're not suffering that much. And it says the children, they have kind of become partners in survival with their parents, and because they also realize the kind of life they are leading, and they have accepted it. They don't have issues like most of the children, like you all, everyone is like kind of, you are born and you grow up in the same place, you study in the same school all through your career and everything, but and if you have to change schools in between, it's such a nightmare. It's so troublesome, and you feel, how will we adjust, how will we get along with new people? It's so difficult, it's traumatizing. But these children, they are so used to this. Every time wherever there is food available somewhere, they just pick up their tents and they move, and they live there for some time, and then they move on ahead. That's survival, because that's how their existence is. And she says that survival in Seema Puri means rag picking. Now over the years, this rag picking has kind of acquired the proportions of a very fine art. There's a technique to it. Garbage to them is gold. Now, garbage is not made of gold, but it is like gold to them. It's as important, as valuable to them as gold is. And it is their daily bread and the roof over their heads. Even if it means a leaking roof. खाली मतलब छत जो है टपक रही है, लेकिन कम से कम छत तो है. That's the importance, and that's this chat, this roof is what the garbage brings them. And this is for the adults, for the grown-ups, but for the child, this garbage is even more. When Sahib says, I sometimes find a rupee or even a 10 rupee note in the garbage. People like us, we get so careless. We get those shopping bags and all, and we throw loose change into it, and without realizing it, we throw the whole thing back into the garbage. Just take out stuff that we have bought and we throw the bags in the garbage. And he says, and this is what he's talking about. And he says, now when you can find a silver coin, that is money, in a heap of garbage, that doesn't stop you from looking for more, because that's hope. And he says, because there's always hope for finding more. And for the children, it has a meaning which is different from their parents, because for the children, it is wrapped in wonder. It's every day they find something new, something interesting. Even if for the elders, for the grown-ups, it is a means of survival. So one winter morning, she sees Sahib standing at the fenced gate in the neighborhood club, and he's watching two young men dressed in white playing tennis. So when she goes and stands next to him, he says, I like this game. And he's just content standing there, watching. And he says, sometimes I go inside also when no one is around, because the gatekeeper, he lets me use the swings. Now Sahib is also wearing tennis shoes that look very strange on his discolored shirt and shorts, and he says someone gave them to me while in kind of explaining to the author, and the fact that they are discarded shoes of some rich boy who perhaps refused to wear them because of a hole in one of them doesn't bother him. आपके और मेरे जैसा कोई हो तो जूता टूट गया है, उसमें ज़रा सा छेद हो गया है, तो हम क्या करते हैं, हम फेंक देते हैं, नए खरीद लेंगे, है ना. So but then for Sahib, it doesn't matter. It's like, okay, a little hole should not affect, and he is happy wearing those shoes. And for a person, like the author says, one who has walked barefoot, even shoes with a hole in them is a dream come true. एक सपना सच होने वाली बात है ना. मतलब जिस इंसान ने सारी जिंदगी बिना जूते के गुजारी है, उसके लिए एक छेद वाला जूता मतलब तो इट्स हेवन, इट्स गॉड सेंड. एंड लेकिन जो वो गेम देख रहा है, the tennis that is watching, that is something which is out of his reach. This is very ironical over here. If you want to call it ironical, because if you think about it, he's a boy who's a ragpicker. He admiring, he can't even afford a new pair of shoes. He's kind of wearing cast-offs, broken, hole-riddled shoes. and he is standing there saying, I like to watch this game of tennis. Tennis is if you think about it, can be equated with affluence. It's an expensive game. Not everybody can afford it. Those tennis rackets are as it is so expensive. And he's standing there watching it. He knows that he can't afford it. He knows that it's out of his reach. But dreams don't cost anything. They are free, and you have every right to dream. And that's what his dream is. He loves to watch it, but he knows his limits. He knows that he cannot reach that point where he would be able to play the game. So he's just happy watching it and watching other people play, and he's also happy just using the swings over there. After some days, the narrator meets Sahib on his way to the milk booth, and in his hand there is a steel canister, and there's no garbage bag on his shoulder today. So when she asks him, he says, I work in the tea stall now. And he points out on some distance and he says, I'm paid 800 rupees every month, plus all my meals, that is 3 meals a day, and 800 rupees. So when she asks him, she says, do you like the job? He doesn't answer, but the author says that it could be seen on his face. His face had lost the carefree look. The steel canister, which seems heavier than the plastic bag that he carried so lightly over his shoulder. Why? Why is the steel canister heavy? Not because it's made of steel and the plastic bag was made of plastic. The steel canister is heavy because he is not the owner of that thing. It doesn't belong to him. This steel canister, it represents responsibility. He is answerable to someone. He has to answer to someone's dictates. Whereas the plastic bag, the garbage bag, was his own. If he wanted to collect garbage, he would do it. If he did not want to collect garbage, he would not do it. And but the steel canister, it is a representation of his slavery, if you want to say, his labor, his hard work, and a loss of his childhood. That's what lost spring is all about. Lost spring refers to the loss of childhood. Spring is equated with childhood, where children, they are forced to do work, manual labor, whatever labor for earning and for the sustenance of their families. Now that is childhood that's been lost. And the author says that Sahib now is no longer his own master. His name is Sahib-e-alam, the Lord of the universe, but he is not even the master of his own destiny. He is not even the master of his own desires. And that is childhood, one childhood that's been lost.